I was deep in the mountains when my dog froze and started growling at the trees. I scanned the ridge. Nothing. Then I saw him. Crouched. Not moving, not blinking. That's when I realized he wasn't hiding. He was waiting. I was hiking in the Olympic National Forest a few years ago by myself and my 2 dogs. We were 4 days in, around 20 miles, at least as the crow flies, from even a known mountain road. I was camping at around 7,000 feet that night, or right where the tree line started thinning out. So when we got to the campsite, a big open meadow on top of a secondary mountain, it was about an hour from sunset. My big dog usually runs around within proximity of the camp as I put the tent up, make dinner, etc. But I noticed this time was a little different. He kept staring up this steep, tree-filled mountainside, tail straight up and barking. Not the bark when he sees marmots. Not the excited, "Oh, you punks are lucky because I'd rip you all apart if my master wasn't here," high-pitched barks. But it was unsure, concerned barks. Now, the day before, I had found a note left under a rock at the last landmark saying that there was a problem bear in the area that had been harassing a party of campers a few days ago. And I myself had seen big cat tracks the day before, so I was rightfully concerned that this may be more than just ground squirrels. I decided to go climb some of the boulders at the foot of the hill while I took my time looking up the hillside for movement before I went to hang my bear bag up there. They were the only trees around to hang the bag. I didn't see or hear anything, but my dog kept quietly whining like there was something up there. So while still concerned, I started hiking up this steep hill to hang the bag. It was so steep, I had to use the trees to balance and lean against so I didn't go tumbling down before making another 5 to 6 step push to the next tree I could lean against. Anyway, I'm slowly making it up this hill, hopping from tree to keep my balance. Then I get about 100 feet up the hill, and I hear a whole lot of big movement about 50 feet in front of me. My dog immediately goes from a deep, low growl to a savage, slobber flying everywhere type of barking. My heart starts pounding out of my chest, and I start to panic. A million thoughts go racing through my head in a matter of seconds, because if this is a bear, my dog is going to try to save me, in which he'll most likely die. And I'm stuck here. If I have to get off that hillside fast, I'm almost 100% going to trip and fall off the 12 to 15 foot cliff onto the boulders below, like hundreds of 5 to 20 foot boulders. So, I'm feeling pretty screwed about now. And I hear my other little dogs start barking and freaking out down at my campsite, which was just out of sight. I had zipped her in my tent so she didn't wander off while I was away. So yeah, I'm absolutely panicking at this point. A few seconds later, I kinda snapped back to it, and I took another few seconds to start to put my survival priorities in order and call my dog back to me. Loki, by the way. He came and sat against my feet as my back was against a tree, so I was kinda stuck there for the moment. But my dog was seemingly trying to separate me from something up there. So I let him lean against me while I tried to collect myself. This was when I realized I had completely forgotten that I had my headlamp on. I reached up so fast to turn my lamp on, I basically punched myself in the face. I had some serious adrenaline dumps going right now, so much so that my knees were starting to shake. I got my lamp on and peered up the hillside. I figured I'll at least get a reflection off the eyes of whatever was up there. Peering, nothing. But I had just heard something. We both did. Whatever it was, it didn't get away or sound like it had made it too far. I knew something was there, so I'm kinda just steadfast at this point. I needed to know what was up there because I have to sleep here tonight. And you know, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, alone. Better to face it than wait like a sitting duck all night was my thought process. So yeah, as I was looking up this hill, at one point my dog lunged forward, unpinning me. He did a fake charge up the hill about 15 feet and, he's snarling and foaming at the mouth at this point. As he did this, I finally saw movement. Something was moving up and breaking the line of the horizon. My dog's bluff made whatever it was blow its cover, so I zeroed in. I called my dog back and silently watched, and what I made out made my heart completely drop. There was a man crouched about 75 feet directly in front of me, wearing not camel clothes, but some raggedy stuff with a hood that blended into the environment perfectly. Actually, almost like a makeshift ghillie suit, but with his face exposed. I couldn't see his eyes, and his face was covered in dirt or something. But I knew we were staring right at each other at that moment. So I stared for what seemed like minutes. No words. I felt like I was trying to subconsciously convey that I was going to stand my ground. I wanted him to know I saw him, but I guess I was just too shaken to speak. As I was staring, my little dog back at the campsite started to bark her head off again, like she was scared. And I also had to get off that hill before it was totally dark or I could be seriously hurt, risk dying trying to get back down. So carefully, I started heading down the hill with my dog who didn't want to leave, but listens. Periodically, I would stop with my back against a tree, holding me up and look in that direction again, just to make it even clearer I saw him. And eventually, I made it down to the boulders at the bottom. By the time I finally jumped down and hit the boulders, my little dog had stopped barking. I could only see the top of my tent from the bottom of the boulders. I thought she was barking just to bark. Dachshunds do that, or just barking back at my dog. But when I got there, my little dog had somehow got out of the tent and was walking around the camp growling with her tail sticking straight out. Still trying to hold it together, I thought, okay, maybe she just got her nose between the zippers and worked her way out. But I was positive I had zipped it so the opening was at the very top of the tent door, out of reach. So in a mixture of being terrified, angry, and the feeling of needing to do something, I reached into my day bag and pulled out my handgun. I fired a single shot into the air as the sun was setting, climbed into my tent without eating, and lay with my firearm next to me until first light. As soon as the sun came up, I was packing up my stuff and leaving, heading back down the mountain. It sucked. It was all downhill back, but I still couldn't cover the ground to get back to my car in one day. It was dark by the time I made it to the last camp, about 4 miles from my vehicle. But thankfully, there were other people there. We sat around a fire they made, and I felt pretty relieved and safe. They started to tell me that they were planning to head that way, where I was the night before in the morning. So I told them my story in detail. Needless to say, we were both walking back to our cars in the morning. Screw all that. The thing that still creeps me out to this day, though, is when I got home and started reading reviews of the same hike I was on, other people had had similar experiences like mine as well. A man was even found dead from a fall around the same boulder range 2 years ago, and a woman was found murdered last year. I was around 17 at the time, and I had just gotten my first job. I lived in rural Western Virginia in a small mountain community. My mom's friend owned a camping resort not far from my house that had a general store, and she said she'd pay me to help out in the store during the busy months in the summer. It was a pretty easy job, and I met a lot of out-of-towners, which was nice. Our community could get so isolated. Most of us lived pretty far away from each other. One day, a big, burly mountain man type came into the store. He was in his late 40s or early 50s, probably 6'5" and about 280 pounds. He looked dirty, like he worked outside a lot. His clothes were sort of tattered, and he had a long beard. We had a few of the woodsy hermit types in the area, and he definitely looked like one of them. He bought some basic items, one of which was one of our homemade bars of soap. When he came to the register, he looked me up and down carefully. He didn't talk for a minute, just stared. His people skills clearly needed work. "Did you make this soap?" he asked gruffly. "Possibly," I said. "I help out with that sometimes." "You make a lot of your own stuff?" "Toiletries and things like that, yeah." "I like that. he said, nodding to himself. I honestly didn't know how to respond. I quickly rang up his items and he paid with crumpled money. Right before he left, he asked, "You cook too?" "Sometimes," I replied. "Bet the boys around here are itching to marry you," he said, smiling to himself. I said nothing. I was puzzled as to what I had said that stood out as wife material. I told Krista, my mom's friend and boss, about the bizarre encounter, and she laughed it off. So did my family and friends. But then, Mountain Man started turning up more often. We chatted a little bit here and there, and I found out he had a cabin in the woods. He claimed he built it with his bare hands. He said he hunted and lived off the land, aside from the things he bought at the store. Over time, our chatter escalated. He started making comments about how nice it would be to have a woman like me around who could make those things and cook his game. One time, he even said I had the kind of figure men look for in a wife. He even started inviting me to fish with him, hunt with him, come see his place, etc. I always politely declined, but he got more and more insistent. I told Krista how uncomfortable he was starting to make me. The intensity with which he said those things really scared me. She told me that when he came in, I should get her and she would ring him up. Thanks to her, I started speaking to him less. I thought maybe I wouldn't have to deal with him anymore. But one night, I was closing up and it was late, around 10 p.m. Krista had left about an hour earlier, and I was leaving by myself. The only two cars in front of the store were an old blue pickup and mine. I was immediately alarmed because I knew Mountain Man drove a blue pickup, but I didn't see him in the lot, just his car, so I walked quietly to mine and checked the back seat before starting her up. When I first turned the key in the ignition, I got nothing but sputters. I tried several more times and panic set in. Of all nights, why now? Just as I reached for my phone to call for help, there was a loud pounding on the driver's side window. I'm shocked I didn't completely lose it. I didn't want to look, but I did. It was him. He smiled a big grin, showing me exactly which teeth were missing. "Need some help?" he said, loudly through the window. I shook my head furiously. "My dad is on his way," I said, hoping to scare him off. I hadn't spoken to my dad in years. Mountain Man laughed. "No, he's not," he said. "Open the door." The hairs on my neck stood up straight. How did he know I was bluffing? "No," I said firmly. "Leave me alone." Suddenly, he looked angry. He pulled the handle, but I had locked all the doors when I first got in. He kept yanking it, pounding on the window. "Leave now, or I'm calling the cops," I screamed at him. He clearly wasn't getting the message, so I pulled out my phone and called 911. I must have sounded hysterical to the dispatcher, and I'm sure she could hear the pounding. She said she'd have officers out as soon as possible, but out here, that could take a while. "The cops are on their way, leave now," I screamed at him, but he didn't stop. Not at first. Then after a few more minutes, he walked back to his truck. I watched him go, hopeful he was done. But then he came back with a crowbar in hand. "No!" I screamed. "Get the heck away from me!" He started swinging the crowbar at the driver's side window. I ducked down into the passenger's seat footwell, covering the back of my neck like in a tornado drill. I heard the sickening crack of glass. But then there were male voices, shouting, telling him to step away. I sat up. Two men were approaching, one holding a firearm pointed right at Mountain Man. I recognized them as a couple of guests staying at the resort. I breathed a massive sigh of relief. I got out of the car and told them the police were on the way. I thanked them over and over while we waited. Surprisingly, Mountain Man didn't try to escape, but the police arrived shortly after, so he didn't get the chance. They took him away, and I gave my statement. I was shaken up for a while afterward. A few weeks later, I got the full scoop on him. Apparently, he had a history of mental illness. He had been in and out of state institutions. He really had been living in a remote cabin in the woods where he wasn't taking his medication, and his condition had worsened. My cousin Luke is a cop. Later on, he told me more about the case. The police searched the cabin after the incident and found a journal. In it, Mountain Man wrote that he was lonely and wanted a wife. He mentioned me by name, thanks to my stupid name tag. Luke said there were a lot of lewd things written about me. He didn't share details, just said that Mountain Man had created a detailed plan to abduct me, starting with sabotaging my engine. When Luke told me that, I nearly burst into tears, thinking about how that night could have ended if those two men hadn't come along. I still can't fully process it. If you've experienced something scary, something that still sticks with you, share it in the comments or email it to MrLiminalStories@gmail.com. With the channel still growing, there's a good chance it'll show up in a future episode. A few years ago, my friend Tez and I set out on a great American road trip. We were going to drive from New York to Los Angeles, zigzagging across the country for 6 weeks. We were both in our early 20s, pretty broke, and since my mom had been a long-haul trucker, I suggested a cheap solution. We'd sleep in the back of our hatchback. It was a cozy setup. We bought blankets and sheets at Goodwill, cut one up for makeshift curtains. By the end of the first week, we could set up camp in under 10 minutes. Luggage moved to the front, curtains up, bedding laid down, and we were out for the night. We slept in parking lots, free campsites, rest areas, anywhere that seemed safe and semi-legal. After that first night, there was never a night that we ever really felt scared, until the last week of the trip. We were near Flagstaff, Arizona, and by then we were in a rhythm. We had no strict schedule, no hard destinations, just a few landmarks we wanted to hit. We'd find places on Google the night before or ask locals and fellow campers, and we'd gotten really good at making friends. We went to Denny's with a group of rednecks we met at the campsite, riding in the back of their pickup. We met an 80-year-old cowboy who took us out dancing. We jammed with musicians during a thunderstorm. Campers fed us. We also spent the 4th of July with families who welcomed us in. There's even one grandma who gave us some edible candies. Every stranger we met had been kind, generous, welcoming. So that night didn't seem like it would be any different. We found a free campsite in the woods through Google and followed the GPS out of the town. When we arrived, something felt off. There was one RV parked nearby, 2 other cars further up in the trees. We pulled up near the RV and a man opened the door. Tez waved at him. He just stared, completely blank expression. Then, without saying a word, he slowly shut the door again, still staring. We figured maybe he just wanted privacy. So we drove further down the road and found a flat spot to park. We didn't set up camp right away. Instead, we goofed off, laughing, taking dumb photos, just being relaxed. Then Tez pointed out a campfire deeper in the woods. We decided to go say hi. We'd made tons of cool friends that way, offering beer or just starting conversations. Near the fire were 2 men, the owners of those 2 cars we saw. They seemed friendly enough. We sat down, had a beer, and started chatting. One of them seemed off. We found out they didn't actually know each other. The older guy was definitely on something, spinning in circles, mumbling about UFOs, but he's harmless. The younger man, though, he said he was a former park ranger. He was handsome, easy to talk to. We spent hours chatting about our trip, our families, all kinds of stuff. Then, he brought up the bear. He said he'd seen one earlier that day nearby in the woods. Tez didn't believe him, so he pulled out his camera, showed us photos, and yeah, it was close. Real close. It freaked us out a bit. We often got up in the night to use the bathroom, and the idea of a bear lurking nearby was unsettling. But then the ranger left and his expression changed. Cold. Flat. Hard to describe. Then he said, "If you get out of your car in the middle of the night, it's not a bear you should be worried about." I waited for the laugh, waited for the punchline, some tease about city girls or scared tourists, but it never came. I chuckled awkwardly and made some dumb joke about serial killers. Tez laughed too, something about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We tried changing the subject, but 5 minutes later, he circled back. He talked about things grabbing you from your car in the night. We kept trying to steer the conversation away. He wouldn't let go of it. The older man was lost in the stars, saying nothing. Me and Tez just laughed nervously, sipped our beers, and tried to move on. Then the ranger stood up, said he was grabbing another beer from the cooler, just beyond the ring of firelight. It was pitch black out there. I couldn't see a thing past the glow of the fire. Then suddenly, a red light. A tiny dot in the darkness. It took me a second to realize that it was a camera. It was taking pictures of us. I saw the screen light up. He checked the photo, then lifted the camera again. Flash. No smile, no group photo, no asking. Just a photo of us from the dark. He came back to the fire and sat down and didn't say a word. We were frozen, both of us just staring, not knowing what to say. Eventually, we mumbled something about needing to go set up our camp. The UFO guy smiled and wished us good night. The ranger, he gave us a smile that didn't reach his eyes and said, "Be careful out there. There's more than bears in the woods." Every hair on my body stood up. Tez forced a laugh, grabbed my arm, and pulled me away from the fire. We stumbled through the dark, found our car using the RV as a landmark, and jumped in. Tez was nearly hyperventilating. Why did he take pictures of us? I was shaking too. I read somewhere serial killers sometimes warned their victims. She stared at me, then locked the doors. "Do you think he just took victim photos of us?" That's when the real panic set in. She flicked on the headlights and I screamed at her to turn them off. No, he knew exactly where we were. By some miracle, it was the only night we hadn't set up our camp yet. There was no gear to tear down, so we just threw the car in drive and floored it out of the campsite. As we got on the dirt road, we saw him. The ranger walked toward our car with that same cold expression.